So in this video, I'm going to give you 5 types of goth that you may not have heard about before. Well, it's not actually 5. If you stick around to the end, I've thrown a bonus 6th style in there just for you. So number 1, Lolita Goth, sometimes called Gothic Lolita or J-Goth. So this is a hugely popular style of goth, originating in Japan, mainly drawing their influences from early Victorian English clothing styles. So typically you'll see Lolita Goths wearing very Victorian style clothing such as bell skirts, corsets and petticoats, and often sporting very period hairstyles to match. Their clothes are generally darker. They're going to be wearing blacks, reds, navies and purples. Now, unlike some other styles, their makeup choices are generally more toned down and muted, so you won't see too much in the way of black and white. Generally, their makeup styles focus more on natural sort of makeups, typically characterized by wearing mainly red lipsticks. It's very rare you'll see a Lolita Goth wearing black lipstick. Number 2, Western Goth or Country Goth. Now, it might seem strange to someone from the outside to mix Western and Goth subcultures, but they go together hand in hand a little bit more than you might think. If you think of Western and country music, it generally has a lot of dark tones and themes running underneath it all, which can fit in quite well with this subculture. As for fashion for Western Goth, think of the bad guy in literally any spaghetti Western or country film you've ever seen. They're always in black. They're always the coolest looking guy there. So these guys are typically wearing a lot of dark or black clothing. Think cowboy hats, duster coats, possibly leather, and waistcoats and cowboy boots. Now, some of the pioneers of the music genre that came to influence Western Goth are Johnny Cash, Jim Morrison, Fields of Nephilim, and Heathen Apostles. So number 3, Visual Kei. Now, another style originating from Japan. So these guys are typically characterized by the big hair, heavy uses of makeup, and very elaborate clothing or stage costumes. Think very similar to Western glam rock. Now, Visual Kei has transitioned slightly more from glam rock into a more shock rock style of music. So if you look at some of the earlier Visual Kei bands like Luna Sea and X Japan, you can see how they've transitioned slowly into more shock rock bands like Deer and Grey and The Gazette. Although Visual Kei is getting much more popular here in the West, in the early beginnings, their androgynous nature was typically a bit of a turn off to the Western market. Number 4, Corporate Goth. Now, what began as a fairly toned down style of goth became a style in its own right. The whole idea was to keep the look toned down to a more professional level for something that would be seen as more acceptable for the workplace. So corporate goth fashion is, by comparison, very simple. You'll see a lot of black suits, black dresses, shirts, long skirts, ties, waistcoats, and some of them may even go as far as to stick on tailcoats and top hats. As for corporate goth makeup, to keep that professional image, it's kept to a very bare minimum. So women may have a bit of dark eyeliner, but the men typically won't be wearing any makeup at all. Number 5, Steampunk. So for someone who doesn't know, the easiest way to try and describe a steampunk is it's kind of a cross between Victorian goth and cyber goth. So think the futuristic goths of the old Victorian world. So steampunk is typically a cosplay type thing rather than a style people wear day to day, because it's generally mixing gentlemanly and ladylike Victorian fashions with what would have been considered sci-fi or futuristic at the time. So think cogs, brass wheels, steel powered machinery, hence the name. And quite often you'll see futuristic yet old-worldy type weapons in people's cosplays and outfits for steampunk. Now, although music plays a small to non-existent part in the steampunk world, they've bled over from being so popular into other types of popular culture medium. Video games like the BioShock series, for instance, draw heavy influence from the steampunk movement. And number 6, just as a bonus, a slightly different one, Fetish Goth or BDSM Goth. So the Fetish Goth is kind of towing the line between cheeky and kinky and what is generally considered acceptable for the outside world. Generally, they're going to walk a very fine line between being clothed and being naked, essentially. Fashion-wise, for BDSM or Fetish Goths, you can expect to see a lot of leather, PVC, fishnets, harnesses and straps, chains, whips, full-on BDSM gear, and very careful use of electrical tape. So the fetish goths found their niche within the goth community because traditionally the goth community was very accepting and were not going to push anyone away because of expressing their sexuality. In fact, fetish goths are so popular that a lot of goth clubs hold specific nights for fetish goths and their admirers only. So that was 6 types of goths that you may not have known about. If you knew about any of these, put it down in the comments, let me know. On the other hand, if you didn't know, tell me something new that you learned today. A like on this video would be much appreciated, and if you want to keep up to date with this kind of thing, subscribe to the channel.